So glad that you're here. We started talking about fall back in the spring. Actually, we said, what kind of classes should we offer? What are people interested in, and what would people want to hear? And one of our pastors on staff said, you should take that True Colors series and rework it and talk like to parents about it. And I said, everybody's heard that. Nobody's interested in that. So I'm glad I didn't make a bet on that, or I'd have lost, because you were obviously interested in that. So what we're going to do over the next few weeks, 6 weeks actually, tonight and 5 more weeks, is we're going to talk about parenting and some issues that are very real in all of our households. Now, I'm going to be honest with you and tell you that I approach this as a fellow parent. I am not an expert, but I am going to share with you what Scripture says, and we're going to talk about some strategies for us to speak truth into the lives of our children. So, what I'd like to do first is pray. And before I pray, I want to tell you one other thing. We're recording these for Church at Shepherd and West Campus folks, so hi Church at Shepherd West Campus folks, and for some of our workers in children's ministry, student ministry who can't be here on Wednesday nights. So that's the reason there's a camera, and that's the reason we're mic'd up, and we're trying to do the whole process. Okay, let's pray. Father, I thank you for allowing us to come together to open your word, to study, and to come to a place which we can hear your truth. But Lord, all of us in this room are interested in the next generation. And for those of us who are parents, we want to guide our children into truth. And we want our children to embrace the gospel and biblical truth in their lives. And in this culture, that's going to come with a price. So Lord, we pray that you will grant us the grace to do this well with our children. You've given them to us as a stewardship, and we want to be faithful. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, I wanted to share something with you real quick. This is a graphic that I found back in the summer, and I thought it was kind of interesting. Kind of the top student problems in public schools. So in the 1940s, which none of us were around for, talking out of turn, chewing gum, making noise, running in the hall, cutting in line, dress code violations, and littering. Those were the big problems in public schools back then. I'll guarantee you this, they'd trade for those problems today. Now, in the 1990s, how many of you were in school in the 90s? Yeah, I thought some of you would be. That's why the graphic caught my attention. I was not. I was the kid of the 80s, late 70s and 80s. Then we have a dramatic shift, right? Drug abuse, alcohol abuse, pregnancy, suicide, rape, robbery, assault. I mean, the problems intensified. And you see 2002, which is the most recent graphic I could find, which I thought was violence, disciplinary problems, interpersonal problems, suicide, gangs, hate, bullying. I think if we did this now, 20 years later, you would get cyberbullying on that, don't you think? What other problems do you think we'd put in this column today? Anxiety. That's probably. I'm sure that's a reality. If you talk to a school counselor, it is. Yeah. Depression kind of go hand in hand with that. I will tell you that violence is still a huge problem today in schools, I think. The gender issue. My daughter has introduced me to something that I had never heard of. I didn't know what a furry was. Do you know what a furry is? It is a child, a human child, who identifies as an animal. They think they're cats. When I was a child, we called that, and I mean this in all kindness, we called that a mental illness. Can't do that now, but that's what we called it back then. Anything else you think you'd put in that line? Good answers. I'm not searching. I'm just wondering if you have one. If you don't, that's cool. But here's what I think we can all agree on. That we are navigating in some water that our parents didn't navigate. I cannot go to my father. Now, admittedly, I'm the old guy, right? I'm the oldest parent of a middle schooler at McNeil Junior High School. I am absolutely convinced of that when I walk down the hall. Because people ask me, oh, is this your granddaughter? No, this is my daughter, okay? No. But my dad was a student in the 1940s. And I was a student in the 1980s. And man, life just looks a lot different today than it did for me. And it looks different for your children than it did for you. And so we have got to talk about some of these. So let me walk through some potential landmines. I just want to give you the roadmap of where we're headed. Here is where we are headed in the next few weeks. Next week, we're going to talk about abortion. We're going to talk about the mantra, my body, my choice. It should be in there somewhere. Don't know why that's out of order. But we're going to talk about abortion. And I think you're going to have to answer this question. And you need a good, solid, you need biblical answers to the questions that your sons and daughters are going to raise in regard to abortion. The next week, we are going to talk about gender issues. What defines a man or a woman? There was a moment in American culture back in the spring that was so alarming. And that was when a nominee to the United States Supreme Court was sitting in front of a hearing of the United States Senate before she was confirmed. Justice Jackson Brown, who was confirmed. And she was asked by a senator, what is a woman? And she said, I can't answer that question. I'm not a doctor. Well, I am a doctor, but mine's in theology, not a physical doctor. But I can define what a woman is. Now, granted that question was loaded with political overtones, and if she answers it, there's a political thing. I get that. But we've come to the place in our society where we can't even figure out which bathroom people are supposed to use. And so we are going to have to talk about this with our kids. If we don't talk about this with our kids, then we're going to be in trouble. We have to talk about homosexuality. The mantra of this generation is love is love. Doesn't matter who it's toward or with. Love is love. So we're going to confront that, and I'm going to give you the answer. No, love is not love. The Bible says God is love. And the God who is love gets to define what love is for everybody else. And He has in His Word. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about racism. Black, blue, all. Whose life matters? We're going to talk about that. And we're going to deal with it. And whether you believe it or not, this is a major, major issue for kids, especially older teenage kids. They're dealing with this. And then finally, we're going to deal with a topic that I think you need to nail down. And this is my choice of topics for us to talk about at the end of this thing. But we're going to have to talk about the gospel, and that is, my friends aren't Christians, but I think they'll go to heaven anyway. We have to talk about that because we are seen as narrow and judgmental, and you've got to have some answers for your children. So that's the roadmap for where we're headed. But tonight, this is kind of the introductory session, and I'll probably be a little briefer tonight than I'll be next week. But tonight we're going to deal with the number one topic. And the first thing you have to settle is, what is truth? That is the first thing that you have to settle. If you have a Bible, open it to John chapter 17. If you don't, it'll be on the screen. But in John chapter 17, Jesus is praying, actually. John 17 is called the high priestly prayer of Jesus. Little kind of brief overview. John chapter 13, they're in the upper room having the Passover meal. Judas leaves to go betray Jesus, and then Jesus takes the remaining 11, the true disciples, and He teaches them. John chapter 14, 15, and 16 has some of the richest, most wonderful teaching in all the New Testament. It is absolutely wonderful to read. You should definitely study and read it. But in John chapter 17, Jesus begins to pray. And specifically, in verse 14, this is what he prays. I have given them your word. The world hated them because they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. I am not praying that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth. Now, there are a couple of things in that I want to focus on, just kind of to say before we really plow into the outline that you have in front of you. Jesus prays in that prayer something that I think we have to embrace as parents. He says in verse 15, I'm not praying that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. Here's a fact. Our children are going to live in this world. I wish that we could go back to a time of more innocence just like you do, but we're not going back. And so our children are going to live in this fallen world. And it's a confused world. I mean, my daughter is a swimmer. It's one of her preferred sports. And as a father, I took particular interest in a story that some of you probably have seen about a transgender swimmer who transitioned from male to female. As a male, he was ranked 584th in the country. As a female, she was ranked number 1 in the country. Now look, I'm not a medical doctor, but puberty makes a difference in muscle development and a lot of other physical attributes. And so we're gonna live in this kind of world, and our kids are asking us these questions all the time. And if they're not asking you, then that's a problem too. Let me tell you why. How many of your kids? How many of you have teenagers? Just let me see hands. Okay. How many of your teenagers have phones? Mine does. Okay. Our teenagers who have phones, and by the way, my daughter has a social media account that we monitor. Actually, it's my wife's Instagram that Callie now uses, and so Marianne sees everything and every, Callie can't get a DM without Marianne knowing this, so that's the safest way we know to do it. But if you're not careful, your child is going to be discipled by Instagram and Snapchat and TikTok. They have those devices in their hands repeatedly. The battle at our house is prying the phone out of her hand. Now, we have ways to do that. Like, we'll cut it off and you won't get it back. I mean, there are ways to be the parent, okay? But what I know is this. She is seeing Instagram posts, and by the way, we don't do Snapchat and TikTok. But she is seeing these Instagram posts, and everything she sees influences her. You are being discipled by something. Here's what I know. That at church, we have them for 2 hours on Sunday morning if you bring them to life group and worship. We have them for 1 hour over there tonight. We might have them for an hour of a home group if your child goes to a home group. That's 4 hours a week. They are consuming 10 times that much media from some source. So which one? I mean, it's just a sheer balance of time that's going to influence them. And so here's what I want to tell you. We as parents have got to step up. And in my house, it's me. It's my wife. We have got to step up. Here's the good news. Study after study still shows this. And I want to encourage you with this. Parents are still the number one influence in the lives of their children. Your children care what you think. Now, I know they gripe and they complain and they act like they don't. But the truth is this: they care what you think. And you still have the greatest entree of influence into their lives. Now, there are a couple of things that I think that we probably all would agree to as to why we have to talk about these things. First of all, the culture around us is changing more rapidly than it has ever changed before. Sociologists who are not Christians say that the speed of change in our culture has just ramped up. For example, things that took a generation to change now take 6 months to change. Social media influencers, entertainment, the education system, and we go to public schools, but there's curriculum out there that is not from a biblical worldview. We've got to understand that. And all of these influences come together, and they're changing our culture so rapidly. But the second thing I think you need to know about the change is this: that our culture is changing more deeply than it has ever changed before. That the changes that we are seeing that take now 6-8 months to make are not just minor little adjustments. They are seismic shifts. For example, I'll give you one example. We'll talk about it next week. Attitudes about abortion in this country. Attitudes about abortion stayed pretty consistently the same for about 60 years from the time they started making surveys. That about 65 to 67% of people said, no, we don't really think abortion is the right thing to do. They would, there'd be some caveats to that. Well, rape, incest, imminent danger to the life of the mother, things like that. But no, not as a means of birth control. But starting in 2005, what had been pretty stable for a generation, all of a sudden took a dramatic turn. It took a dramatic turn, and in the next decade, what had been pretty stable for 60 years, the tables completely turned. Now it's about 40% say disapprove of abortion, about 60% say yes, approve of abortion. And so our culture is changing quickly, and it is changing dramatically. Now, that being said, it kind of feels like that what used to be rock solid is now jello. I mean, it just feels like nothing's solid anymore. And so we've got to have something solid to hang on to. So here's my challenge for you tonight as parents, that we need to hear the words of Jesus. And that is, in verse 17, sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth. There are a couple of things, and you can go to the notes now. That's all introduction, and we'll go to the notes if you want to take notes. A couple of things that I want us to talk about tonight. Number one, the current culture is hostile to anyone who affirms truth. If you affirm that there is absolute truth, that there's right and wrong, there's black and white, not just multi shades of gray, then you are going to find yourself at the opposite end of the spectrum from the culture. Jesus said this in that passage that we read in verse 14. He says, I've given them your word, and the world has hated them because they are not of this world. Disciples of Jesus don't have to try to be different. If you're a follower of Jesus, you're just going to stand out. Eventually, that's going to be the case. You don't have to try to be something different because you have been fundamentally made different. The world has one set of values, and those values are totally opposed to the biblical values that we understand from God's Word. Now, when I say the world, and when Jesus said the world, I'm not talking about the physical world. He's talking about the controlling culture around us. He's talking about the people who have the microphone. People in the media, entertainers. In the life of a teenage girl, what her favorite singer says has more weight to her than just about anything else. Now, I told you parents are still number one influence, But those other influences are there. In the life of a teenage boy, guess who it is? Their favorite athlete. That's it. For most boys. Now, certainly there are some boys who are more musical and there are some girls who are more athletic. But those two people have they've got the microphone in our culture. And very few of them are espousing a biblical worldview. Very, very few. There are a few really good ones. A guy named Albert Pujols that plays baseball for the St. Louis Cardinals, deeply committed Christian. I don't know if you're familiar with a young lady named Sydney McLaughlin. She is a track superstar, and she is absolutely incredibly outspoken as a Christian. In addition to that, Allison Felix, who we had here, she is as well. But what I'm saying is most of the people who have the microphone, the news media, education, entertainment, many of those people do not have a biblical worldview. And when I say education, I want to make one thing really clear. I'm not talking about my daughter's teachers. I know some of them. They are good, godly people. But the entertainment system as a whole, and especially teachers' unions, are not good, godly people. I'm just going to put it like that. Tony Evans, who's a great preacher, puts it this way, and it's one of the things I think you need to understand. In many ways, we have lost home field advantage. There was a time when Christians held sway in our culture. You couldn't get elected to the city council in Wichita Falls, Texas, if you didn't faithfully go to church somewhere. Baptist church, Methodist church, Church of Christ, and Catholic church. Couldn't be on a school board. That's not the case anymore. Nobody's asking these candidates where do you go to church. Doesn't happen. Seen as discriminatory. Laws were passed that were deeply rooted in things like the Ten Commandments, right? We had home field advantage. We're wearing the white jerseys now. We're the visitors. Now, there are a couple things I know about being a visitor from my time in athletic and from just going to games. You will be outnumbered and you will be booed and ridiculed. I'll tell you how I know that. 2005, Hurricane Katrina hits New Orleans and Baton Rouge. And Tennessee, my volunteers, wearing orange and white, they're to play LSU, first SEC game of the season. Well, the game gets pushed to a Monday night, and I've got friends, I lived in Louisiana for 10 years. I got great friends who are LSU fans. They call me, and they said, Bob, two of our friends who were going to go to the Saturday game can't go because it got pushed to a Monday night. You want to go? I'm all in. Yeah, I'm going. So I put on my orange and white shirt, and we take off. They've got on their LSU stuff. We get there and pull up, and we start walking toward the stadium. And I was nearly assaulted going toward the stadium. And I'm looking around, and I don't see another orange shirt in sight. Now look, I know we're not going to even be close to numbers, but I'm thinking there's a section, right? We go in, and we're in the north end zone of Tiger Stadium. By the way, Tiger Stadium is one of the most hostile places you'll ever go play a football game if you're the visitor. We're in the north end zone. That's where the student section is. I am one section over from the student section. And they've had all day on a Monday to imbibe some adult beverages on the campus. I don't think anybody went to class that day at LSU. So we're in there, and I'm telling you, they are ridiculing me. They are harassing me. The only thing, nobody ever touched me. But they did everything else they could to me. We played the game, and we were behind at the half. It was Les Miles' first game as a coach at LSU. And when he left, the student section cheered for him real loud, and he tipped his hat to the student section. And I said, that might have been a little premature. And we came back in the second half. We tied them, and we won in overtime. They had to kick a field goal, and we scored a touchdown. It's over. We win. You know what I said? Nothing. They left quietly in disappointment. I left quietly in fear. We got to the truck. My three LSU buddies. Yeah, I'm gloating then. I'm talking some smack all the way back out of Baton Rouge then. But we were the visiting team. And I got booed and I got harassed. And guess what? That's what's going to happen in this culture. There is going to be a price to be paid for standing for what is right. This is one of the reasons I really want you to be here for these sessions. Because nobody likes harassment. I laugh about that story now. It was kind of uncomfortable at the time. Because I figured if I got in a fight, I'd be the one going to jail with the LSU police department, you know. Nobody likes harassment. And if you get harassed enough, you might just change jerseys. I don't want your child to put on the jersey of the world. I want your child to keep wearing the cross. And we're going to talk about how some people want to try to have it both ways and compromise. And we'll deal with some of that as we walk through this. Now, here is the battle line. The battle line is truth. The source of truth and what is truth. That's really the battle line. Now, the culture defines truth as a matter of personal perspective. Some of you have heard this, obviously, but you have your truth and I have my truth. No. There is one truth. In verse 17, Jesus said, sanctify them by the truth. Your word is truth. You can't have your truth and me have my truth. Now look, you can have your opinions. You can have your perspective. Some of you have experiences that I don't have, and I can learn from those experiences, broaden my worldview, and there's a lot in that you can possess. But you can't have your truth. This really came to light in about 2018 when the Me Too movement came out. And the Hollywood actresses began to talk about how these high-powered producers were forcing them to have sex in order to, get a movie part and all those sort of things. And during that, it was actually Oprah Winfrey who said it first. She's speaking her truth. And it just, if Oprah says it, it kind of takes a life of its own. And that's what people will constantly repeat now. Now look, you can't have your truth. Because here's the problem. What happens when your truth conflicts with my truth? It's not going to work. I honestly believe that we are living in a similar time to the day of the judges in the Old Testament. 3 times in the book of Judges there is a refrain that is spoken that I want you to see. It's Judges 21:25. In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Who's the king? The king's the authority, right? The king makes the rules. In the ancient world, whatever the king said was the law. So if there is no king, there is no law, and everyone is a law unto themselves. Morally, we have come to this place. And we've got to grasp that as parents. Secondly, not only is the culture defining truth as personal perspective, but the culture defines truth by the collective community. You say, well, no, that your truth and my truth, okay, that might conflict. And so truth is whatever we all say it is. Truth is whatever we all agree that truth is. Like, if we all agree that it's okay to kill a baby in the womb, then it's okay. It's fine. There is a problem with truth being determined by the collective community. And by the way, this is not something that I just made up. This is the argument of atheists when they ask, when the question is asked of atheists, well, if you discount the Bible and you throw out absolute truth, how do you make laws? And they say, well, truth is whatever the collective community says it is. Truth is whatever we all kind of agree on, or at least the majority of us agree on. Now let me just give you a historical example that will absolutely shatter this. Was it right or was it wrong that the Nazi Germans killed 6 million Jews? Right or wrong? It was wrong. Okay, if you get that one wrong, you failed the test. Okay, just to be honest, it was wrong. But the collective community said it was okay. And some people would push back on that and they'd say, oh, but Bob, not all Germans were Nazis. No, they weren't. But all Germans watched their Jewish neighbors lose their stores and be forced out of their houses and be put on cattle cars, and they knew they never came back. And they silently consented. That's what's wrong with truth being determined by the collective community. Now, much of our world asks the same question that Pontius Pilate asked. John chapter 18, verse 37, I think these verses are in the outline. I know they'll be up here. Then Pilate said to him, he's talking to Jesus at Jesus' trial. Then Pilate said to him, so you are a king? And Jesus answered, you say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world, to bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. Pilate said to him, what is truth? And after he had said this, he went back outside the Jews and told them, I find no guilt in him. Pilate's question still rings through 2,000 years of history. What is truth? One of the most common mantras that you'll hear in our culture is, especially for those of you who might have college students, or as your students go off to college, they're going to hear this. They're going to hear it from their philosophy professors. They're going to hear it from their psychology professors. They're certainly going to hear it when they take classes in liberal arts. There's no such thing as absolute truth. Now, here's what I want you to think about with me. Nobody outside an academic setting believes that. You don't believe that. I have a neighbor who's a math professor at MSU. And I asked him one day, I said, you ever given a math test where on that test there was a problem where there was more than one right answer? He looked at me like I was an idiot. He said, Bob, it's math. That's not possible. There is one right answer. Math is absolute. You live with that. If you go to the convenience store, you go to the Stripes on your way home, and you buy a Dr. Pepper and a Snickers and a bag of chips, and you go up and the clerk says, that'll be $14.24. You look in your wallet, you have a $20 bill, you hand them a $20 bill, what do you expect back? I'll do the math for you. You expect back $5.76. That's what you expect back. But if you also stood there putting that $5.76 in your wallet, and the next person in line walked up and they had a Dr. Pepper, a Snickers, and a bag of chips, and the clerk said, that'll be $11.20, you'd wonder, whoa. Math is absolute, right? You drive home with a belief and a faith in absolute truth. There is a red octagonal sign that you will come to. And some intersections you'll come to have 4 of them, right? That sign means, what does it mean for me? You drive home with a faith that those signs are absolute, that people believe the same things about them. And so, this whole deal about there's no such thing as absolute truth, it doesn't work in math, it doesn't work in accounting, it does not work in driving, it doesn't work in any area of life except for one. The only time this ever comes up is morality. That's the only time it comes up. It comes up when it comes to morals. And let me tell you why it comes up. It comes up because people know what the Bible says and they want to live their lives totally opposed to that truth. They want to make it a philosophical debate when it's a very simple right and wrong. So, number 2, followers of Jesus embrace a standard of absolute truth. What is the standard of absolute truth that we embrace? Well, Jesus said it. Sanctify them in your truth. Sanctify them in truth. Your word is truth. Here's what I want you to remember. Absolute, objective truth exists, and it is revealed in the Bible. Jesus believed his own words were truth. John chapter 14, verse 29, Jesus says, "For I did not speak on my own initiative, but the Father himself who sent me has given me a commandment as to what to say and what to speak. Jesus believed his words were the words of God. He also believed that the disciples would write truth. I'm going to read a verse to you I don't think it's in the outline, but it's a little bit later in the passage. In John 17, verse 20. Jesus said this, I pray not only for these, but also for those who believe in me through their word. Now remember, he's got the 11 disciples here when he prays this prayer. And what he's saying is that others are going to believe in me through their word, through what the disciples wrote. And what the disciples wrote is the New Testament. And what Jesus is saying is, my words are true, the New Testament is true. And more than that, Jesus believed the Old Testament. Jesus repeated every one of the 10 Commandments. And more, by the way. But he repeated every one of the 10 Commandments. Jesus believed the Old Testament was true. Psalm 119, verse 160, the sum of your word is truth, and every one of your righteous ordinances is everlasting. Now, there are two aspects of biblical truth. Biblical truth, number one, is universal. It is universal. It is true for all people at all times. If something is true for Americans that isn't true in Nigeria or Russia, it's not a biblical truth. When I was a kid, I grew up in a very, very conservative, I will use a word that some of you will certainly understand, legalistic church. And you got to understand, I was born in 1964. I'll be 58 on my birthday, which is Saturday, by the way. But me and about 12,000 of my friends will go for a bike ride. So I'm growing up, and my teen years are in the mid-70s. Now, some of you are like, I hadn't even discovered America in the mid-70s. I get it. That's okay. But there were these shows on television. One of them was called The Partridge Family. And, of course, I was a big Brady Bunch fan. And, I mean, you've seen some of those shows and reruns and all that kind of fun stuff. And the style for guys' hair was long. Like, down over the ears and down the neck. And it was that was the style. And I can remember our preacher getting up, preaching against long hair, men having long hair. And the funny thing about that was in our little country church, right over his shoulder against the wall, there was a portrait of Jesus. You know where this is going. Now look, I think those guys, those pastors, they were good men. They were trying to do the right thing. I just think they were a little off track. But if it's not true for all people at all times, it's not a biblical truth. Biblical truth is true for all people at all times. So what I'm not trying to say is, let's read our culture into this. Second, biblical truth is unchanging. And I think we have got to come down on this because there are some influences in Christian life. There are some authors out there that I would tell you, I quite frankly think some of their work is dangerous, who are trying to rewrite Scripture and say we've misinterpreted a lot of these passages. I love sports, and a lot of my illustrations come from sports, but back in the Summer Olympics last year, the ones held in Tokyo, we won the medal count. We had 113 medals, and the Chinese had like 105. Well, the interesting thing is that Chinese state media ran another graphic. Theirs said that we had 113 medals, they had 114. And the way they did that was that they claimed Taiwan as part of China, so they added Taiwan's medals to their count. And so they come up with 9 more medals. So see, if you can't win the game, change the rules. God is not going to rewrite the Bible for our generation. He's not going to do it. And our children need us to stand firm. Our kids need to know where the guardrails are. They need to know where the boundaries are. They are taking in more media than any generation has ever taken in. And if we don't at least add a voice to that, I'm going to tell you we're going to lose a generation. There are a few things that I'm absolutely certain of. One is this: not talking about this stuff isn't working. I may not be the most qualified to talk about this stuff, but I will tell you that not talking about it is not working at all. We have got to pour truth into our children. They are desperate for it. I'll tell you one of the things that I find really interesting is that a lot of our high school students and our college students especially, they will come to me and say, I'm so glad you talked about this if I preach a sermon on one of these particular topics. Nobody's telling us this. That's kind of their response. Nobody's talking about this. And we have got to do that. So why does this matter? Let me give you 3 bullet points real quick. Teenagers need a source of authority, not simply because I said so. That is not going to fly. We all know that. That's never flown, right? It didn't fly with our generation. It's not flying with this generation. But I want to ask you a question. And I'm coming to this by way of application. A lot of this tonight I know has been introduction, but I really want you to leave thinking about something. Is the Bible honored in my home? Now, I think you can choose a lot of different ways to do that. You might have a family devotional time. I'll be honest and tell you that we have been very ambitious at times. We're going to have a family devotional time every night, and it didn't work. Not every night. It's not going to work. I know many of my friends post scripture on the walls of their homes. I think that's a way to honor the Bible, to say this is something that we revere. Some families have verses that are like their family verse. But I want to just tell you the best way you can honor the Bible in your house. Let your kids catch you reading the Bible. I get up before anybody else at my house because it's quiet. It's not when the other 2 get up. I like quiet. They like to talk. That surprises some of you. I'm talked out when we're done here. I've used all the words I have on you. But every now and then, Callie will get up out of the bed and she'll come over to where I'm usually to do my quiet time. And I'll sense her coming. And I don't acknowledge her and she'll turn and she'll leave. In 15, 20 minutes, she'll come back. I'm done, I don't do 3-hour devotional times. Let your kids catch you reading the Bible. It will make a difference in their life. This really is important. This isn't just the stuff we do on Sunday. Number 2, the test of conviction is not what you say, but what you do. Kids have a special sensor for hypocrisy. They see through our hypocrisy. You can fool the people at work. You can fool the people down the street. You can fool the people at the ball game. You can't fool the people that live in the house with you. They have a special sensor for hypocrisy. And I'm going to tell you that you can get a lot of things wrong as a parent, and your children will still respect you. But hypocrisy, this generation especially, will not countenance it. So I got to ask myself a question. Am I living what I say I believe? And I'll just give you an example. I mean, you can tell your child all day long, look, we think homosexuality is a sin in our house because the Bible says that, and I got some really good reasons that Pastor Bob gave me, and we're going to talk about that. But if you can't obey Ephesians chapter 5, do not be drunk with wine, then they're wondering, well, why do we obey this command but you disobey that one? And so you got to ask yourself a question, am I seeking to live a life of consistency? And I don't want to put anybody on a guilt trip in this room. I am not trying to make you feel guilty and act like I'm perfect. I am not. But I will tell you this. I have broken a few commandments in front of my child. And I went and told her I was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. I've asked God for forgiveness, and I'm asking you for yours. Transparency is not what... Perfection is not what your children are looking for, but transparency is. Number 3. Parents must model the beliefs and attitudes we desire to reproduce in our children. Kids will not do what we say, but they will reproduce with unerring accuracy what we do. There is no doubt about that. Okay, next Wednesday night, we are going to talk about the abortion issue and how you communicate that to your children. I also realize that for some of you, some of this is like, well, this is kind of way out in front for us. We're not talking to our kids about these issues. Good. Come back. My job is to equip you. So if you get this under your belt early, you can build a better case that I'm going to build for you over the next few years, and you can really explain it well to your child. All right? Thank you guys for coming. God bless you. Have a good evening.